Hello, my name is James Shuttleworth, and today I will be talking to you about burnouts in athletics, more specifically in the collegiate atmosphere. So, I initially got into this project because I was an athlete in high school and personally experienced some of the feelings of burnouts and symptoms of burnouts, and also witnessed some of my teammates go through the same thing. So then that led me to do a little bit more research, and I came upon the story of Hunter Tubert. So Hunter Tubert was plays tennis for Ohio State, and going in his freshman year, he was the top 10 player in the nation, and he ended up quitting tennis and not returning to the sport for 2 years. And when he returned to the sport, he was still a good player, but he was not as good as he could have been if he had refined his tennis playing abilities over all those years. And he quit because he was overstressed, and this led to his burnout. So, is burnout really a problem, or is that just a single story? Well, 47% of athletes have experienced burnout, 72% of athletes have experienced staleness, and 66% of athletes have experienced or have felt overworked in their time as sports. And that's according to the NCAA, and it's on their website. So, what exactly are burnouts? Burnouts are defined by J.D. DeFreese and Alan Smith as perceptions of physical and mental exhaustion, as well as defined as sport devaluation. So these two things mean, the first means that the athletes perceive that they are physically and mentally exhausted. It has nothing to do with how much actual pressure is put on them. It just has to do with how they actually perceive that to be. And then the second is sport devaluation. This just means that the athletes begin to see their sports as trivial, and then this is what leads athletes to eventually drop out of their sport, or at least begin to lack in performance. So what causes burnouts? Well, stress is the main cause of burnouts, and the reason that stress causes burnouts is that athletes are under a lot of stress. They have stress from their time commitments as well as from mental pressures. For time, athletes are expected to go to practice multiple times a day. They're expected to perform well academically, on top of maintaining a social life, finding time to eat, and also finding enough time to sleep to recover from workouts and still do well. And then they're also under a lot of stress from the mental pressures, and these pressures come not only from the athletes themselves, but also from their coaches. The coaches put stress upon the athletes put pressure on the athletes for them to perform well, because when the athletes perform well, it is a good representation of the coach's ability. And then the athletes put the stress and pressure upon themselves because many scholarships are given out in one-year scholarships and are renewed after each year, rather than being a multi-year scholarship. So athletes have that pressure to succeed, thinking that they might not get that scholarship or continue to receive their scholarship if they do not perform as they are expected to. So if we know that athletes have a lot of stress, and that in a study that J.D. DeFreese and Alan Smith also did, where they proved that athletes who experienced a lot of stress also experienced higher burnout symptoms, what's the answer to that? How do we solve that? Well, the answer to that is humor. And the reason that humor is the answer is shown by Herbert Lefcourt, who is a multi-time published author and on the ideas of emotions and stress. And he talks about humor, and he identifies humor as a coping strategy, and specifically he identifies it as an emotion-focused coping strategy. So an emotion-focused coping strategy is a strategy that deals with how we respond to the stress, whereas a physical-based coping strategy is a strategy where we try to actually mitigate the amount of stress. So this is really important because it would be very difficult to lessen the amount of stress that athletes have, because it's just the nature of the beast of being an athlete and being in a competitive setting. So it's really important that we look at how the athletes can respond to the stress. Another study that was done by Carmen Moran who's published in many journals in the ideas of emotions and stresses. He is a professor for a university in Australia, and he did a study on social worker students, and he studied both their emotions or their humor abilities and their relative stress levels. And he found a significant association between the two. He found that the students who maintained strong humor coping strategies also had a lot less stress, which is really important because this is just one of the many studies that show that humor can be really used to mitigate stress. So if we know that humor is the answer, and we know that stress causes burnouts, but how? Where do we go from here? What do we do? Well, this is primarily the university's responsibility, and the universities need to integrate humor into programs for the student athletes. So many universities, most if not all universities, have programs for their athletes, and so it can be integrated. Humor can be integrated into those programs as a stress coping strategy by integrating it into the tutoring, into the freshman orientation that many athletes, that are specific to athletes, as well as into the coach's abilities. So the tutors could use humor coping strategies to joke about getting an answer wrong, or other things that could be, or how you did it on a test, to make that stressful experience seem more trivial, which then would help athletes to deal with their stresses. And it would be a model for athletes in the future for how they could use humor on a day-to-day basis to deal with their stress. And then if it were integrated into the programs, the freshman orientation programs for student athletes, the program itself could physically teach students on the benefits of humor, and on the benefits of using humor, and how it can really help them in the day-to-day life to be more satisfied and also to perform better because they will not experience these burnout symptoms. And then finally, with the coaches, like the tutors, could act as models for how you can use stress or humor to deal with stress. They can, when the team loses and the coach is stressed, the coach can model exactly how you can use humor and joke about stuff or things that happened in the game to see how you can use humor as a stress coping strategy. So, with all that in mind, it's really important. So if going back to Hunter Tour, we know that Hunter would or could have gone on to the professional atmosphere had he not taken those 2 years off due to his burnout. So this really has a great effect on many athletes, because not only would it help the athletes go on to the professional atmosphere, some athletes it would help keep them in school because they can afford their school through their scholarship. Thank you.